everyone. This is 3Sixteen podcast. Thanks for checking us out. I am Clayton from 3Sixteen Creative Works. We always want to start by thanking our production crew because if we wait to the end, we're going to forget them. So we always want to thank Larry and Sandy, of course, our creative producer Esther, our studio producer who is Justin, and the house manager who is Danielle. Hey guys, listen, I'm so honored today to have with us in the studio live at the farmhouse is Christine Gerling. Is that how you pronounce that? Gerling?
It is.
Yeah, Christine Gerling. And it is Christine, right?
It is
not Christine, because there's so many versions or variables of the Chris name, right?
I get it wrong a lot.
So it's Christine.
It is Christine.
Hey, it's Christine Gerling. Today we are talking with her because there's a couple of reasons, really, and this is absolute truth in lending. I asked Christine to come in the studio today to talk about a couple of things. So the first thing we want to talk about, talking with Christine, is just her life story. Now, it's been an incredible journey just from the things that I have seen. I don't know much about her. I know her family quite a bit better. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to start with today and then kind of go backwards and start all over. So today you're married.
I am.
Yeah.
Yes.
Happily married?
Most days.
Some days, right?
Almost 15 years.
You've been married for 15 years, happily for 5. Right?
That feels generous, but yeah, sure.
And you have a couple kids, 2-3 kids?
Yeah, we have 2 boys. They are 4 and 3.
Yeah, and everybody's just normal. Is this just a normal life?
I mean, who is normal?
Yeah, so
sure.
It's a normal marriage,
Yep.
normal kids. You live not in the Chicagoland area.
We live in Chicago.
You live in the city of Chicago.
Do.
And life is just normal.
I mean, I don't know what that means.
But you haven't always been normal. I mean, you've had kind of it's been a broken road getting here, right?
Absolutely.
And that's really one of the reasons why we want to talk here, because talking with is about kind of helping people talk through their faith story, because we believe that God is still writing the Bible or His Word through the lives of people. And so that's why today I'm so honored to have Christine Gerling as we allow God to preach through the story that He gave you. So take us back to the beginning. You probably don't remember birth, but you may have heard some stories, right?
I don't remember it clearly, no. But yeah, I was born. That is true.
Yeah, at some point along the way, that happened. Now your parents. So let's start there, because that's really how I know you, and I can go into my perspective of that from that corner of the world in a little bit. But your mom and dad is Wes and Lori.
They are.
Yeah. And again, just normal people.
I mean, no. They're extraordinary.
Yeah. So that's kind of where your life diverges from the rest of us, right? I mean, I was born and raised very normal, right? Lower middle class, just kind of average, everyday, blue-collar kind of guy. But you were born into extraordinary.
Yes, I was born into some lineage of Christianity.
Yeah.
I actually used to say that I was just born a Christian. I didn't have a choice.
Right. So you never had to get a personal relationship with Jesus.
I didn't. I was gifted that.
Because it was inherited to you.
Yes.
But it didn't start with Wes and Lori, right? I mean, was it start with your grandpa?
Yeah, so both of my grandpas were missionaries who started churches, pastored for a long time.
And all in America?
Nope. My dad's dad started a church in Australia. They lived out there for a few years.
Did you know your grandpa?
I did. Yeah.
So is he still alive?
No.
He passed away.
Yeah. My last living grandparent just passed away this past August.
Oh, sorry to hear that.
Yeah, thanks. But yes, when I was 2 years old, we didn't move. We visited Australia.
Really? Do you remember any of that?
I do have some snippets. Those are like my earliest memories, because I can tie it to I know how old I was.
Yeah.
But yeah, I held a koala. We waited for a Tasmanian devil to wake up at the zoo.
Do you remember the flight?
I don't.
Okay, because that's like 24. Isn't it like 24 hours?
I think
right?
it's ridiculous.
It's 24 hours to get there and 12 hours to get back.
Probably. I think they probably drugged me if they had any wisdom. I don't know.
Right. Now, so is it your dad's dad started a church in Australia?
Yes. Yep.
So he just woke up one morning and he said, "God told me Australia is the place to be."
Likely. I honestly don't know the origin of what led them. They were pastors in Connecticut I think it was Connecticut. New England somewhere, for many years, and that's where they finished their career. But at some point, they picked up and went to Australia for a couple of years.
Really?
And pastored there. Yep. So that's my dad's dad.
And they were, so you knew him as a child, and
Yep.
good people,
Yeah.
solid
Yeah.
pastor, church planters types of people. No, as far as you know, scandalous, rags to riches. They weren't crackheads who became Christian.
No.
Right? 'Cause-
Yeah. I mean, I think my grandpa used to drive a motorcycle.
Yeah, well,
So it's
there
like,
you go.
there's got to be something
There's
there.
a little bit of a wild streak there,
But
right?
yeah, no, I know no scandal from my dad's parents' side for sure.
So then really your dad was raised as a preacher's kid.
Oh yes, yeah, my dad was raised as a Wesleyan preacher's kid.
I don't know what that means, but it sounds really strict.
It is very strict. Yeah, the kind of thing where it's like he wasn't allowed to go bowling or play, pool because that's places where bets happen.
Yeah, well, and
smoking happens.
Yeah, it sure does.
So he couldn't do that.
And not only just not on Sunday, but like Monday through Saturday, we're not bowling.
Right.
We're not playing pool. We're not playing cards because once you give the devil a foothold,
Absolutely, he's just gonna sneak in.
you could bet in that. Okay. And was your dad an only child?
He was not. He's the middle of 3 boys.
Oh, for crying out loud! So you've got 2 uncles on your dad's side.
I do.
Good dudes. Solid. I mean, because we're going to get to your dad in a minute, but I mean, your dad is your dad, right? I mean, I know and love Wes, but your uncle's just like your dad.
Yeah, so one of my uncles on his side is also a missionary. He is a Bible translator. They lived in Indonesia for a long time, and I mean, so when I say I come from Christian lineage, it's just,
Don't you want to live this life just for a little bit? Don't you want to travel the world and just say Jesus, right? That sounds like I just want to do that. I just sit on the beach and say Jesus, right?
Fantastic.
Call myself a missionary. All right, so let's tuck your dad's side away for a minute. Now let's talk about your mom's side. Now she comes from
more and more Christian.
more and more Christians, right? So a lineage of godly people as well.
Yeah.
And her dad did what?
So her dad was the executive. Well, he was a pastor for many, many years, and then he became the executive director of what is now Life in Messiah, and did that. They lived in Israel. They've done all sorts of things also. And then my dad, 30 years ago, took over as executive director when my grandparents moved over to Israel for a few years. And he was executive director of Life Messiah for 30 years. That's how I grew up.
So your mom was an only child?
Nope, she's the youngest of 4.
She's the youngest of 4. And she was raised in the Life in Messiah culture.
Yeah, so she was originally a pastor's kid. I honestly don't know how old she was when my grandpa became the executive. I think he was originally on the board of Life in Messiah, and then, became the executive director at some point there. But mostly she was like a pastor's kid growing up.
And so that's how I got to meet your mom and dad. And I don't know if it was through my day job. So I sell products and services in the financial market. Yeah. And I think maybe that's how I got to meet that organization and your mom and dad by selling them payment processing for their company, for donations and whatever. But I knew a couple of people that worked on staff there, right? So Sarah, Marilyn, and then I got to know more people. But I was also working on a project myself. So I was working on a just the concept of who was the guy that took Jesus off the cross, cleaned him, wrapped him, and buried him. Like I was just hung up on that guy for a little bit. And like, who was that guy? And so I had to find out. So I wrote a one-man performance piece called The Gospel According to Joe. Started that project, I think, in 2012, and that's right when I met your mom and dad in that organization. Your dad was actually my script advisor. So he really kind of busted me a lot on a lot of my preconceived ideas about Jewish culture and who these guys were and who Joseph of Arimathea maybe was and all this stuff. So I kind of wrote an outline, and after he read, he's very kind, he's very generous, but he's like, okay, so this is not even, why don't you come to the office?
This is terrible.
Yeah, why don't you come to the office and sit down and let's kind of talk about this story a little bit. So he really put context to that project. I'm eternally grateful for Wes and Lori, that organization. So you were raised. Here's the question. Your dad eventually married your mom.
Yeah, before I was born.
But your dad then was the executive director of the organization that his father-in-law started. So here comes the question.
Yeah.
What came first, the job or the wife? I mean, did he become the executive director because he was married to, or?
So they were married when he became the executive director, but they were working with Life in Messiah back before. I think, this is forever ago.
Right.
But I think that he was like interning or starting to work there like at the beginning of their relationship.
Okay.
I could be misquoting that.
Yeah, well, I'm sure your dad will call and tell you it was wrong. I started working there first, and then your mom. Okay.
No, they met on the book field. They met selling books. They would go door to door and sell books. They didn't meet going door to door.
No, right.
They were both in the same company.
What is that? What is a book salesman?
They don't exist anymore.
No, they're like internet salesmen now, right?
Yeah, sure. But yeah, they would like go door to door and like sell like encyclopedias or like educational books for kids.
Really? Mm-hmm. Is that's not a thing anymore?
I don't believe it is.
That's incredible. I actually know a couple of old encyclopedia salesmen who are wonderful people and wonderful salesmen. They just know how to sell.
Yeah.
So that's how they met?
Yeah, so they both did well enough, that summer and won a trip to somewhere in Colorado, I think. And, my mom walked in the room and my dad the world stopped.
Yeah.
And it was like, well, I need to meet that woman.
So let's just camp out here a second. So your mom and dad, they're probably in college, separate colleges, don't know each other. Uh-huh. And in order to help make ends meet in the summer, they work for a door-to-door encyclopedia book program. So they both don't know each other.
Right.
Start this job, walking door to door, all over Chicagoland, right?
No, all over the world. The country.
Yep.
They were, I don't even know where they were, but they were not selling in the same part of the country.
But they both did well, and so they won it at the end of the summer. They won a trip.
Right.
Cancun, we'll call it.
Sure.
And they both they don't know each other. And they meet on this rewards trip to Cancun because they both had a great summer selling encyclopedias.
Yep.
That's incredible. So God has a story designed for you, right? Because here's the thing. Now this is the Calvinist in me, not the Wesleyan in me, but so the Calvinist would say that if anything changed, it would change everything.
Absolutely.
Right? So those early years of them becoming encyclopedia salesmen was absolutely about you, right?
I think everything is about me, but sure.
Clearly, right. Clearly everything's about you. But that's how that started. And so then they met, they started dating. They probably had the greatest trip of their life in Cancun, and they decided they come back and they stayed in touch. Clearly, right? However that worked out, and then she's like, "Hey, listen, my dad owns this great company, and since your dad's a church planter, why don't you move to the Chicagoland area and come work with my dad?"
Something not remotely like that.
Something not even close. but we're getting closer.
Yeah, so actually when they met, my dad was engaged to another woman.
Oh, there is scandal.
And it was one of those, I think this is the next step.
Yeah.
I'm supposed to get married. We've been dating for a while. I guess I'm gonna propose to you. And I'm sure she's a wonderful woman.
No, I'm sure.
And but then he met my mom and was like, ruh-roh, I gotta do some backstepping here. And my dad knew my uncle, my mom's brother. And so when he finds out, like, oh man, Lori Curry just walked in the room. Wait, I think that's David Curry's sister. So he goes up to David and is like, tell me about your sister.
Oh, no.
And David goes, she's engaged.
Yeah, and you're engaged too.
Oh, back off.
They're both engaged.
Well, she wasn't.
Oh, right.
My uncle just said,
trying to protect her.
Yeah, just said, get out of here.
Wow. As the world turned.
Dun, dun, dun.
But eventually your dad does move to the Chicagoland area.
Yes. Yes.
He gets a degree doing something, probably a seminary, something, right?
Yep.
And now he is one of the most intelligent, articulate men I know, educated in Jewish culture. So somehow he got grafted into that desire or that ministry. That had to have come from your mom's family. I mean, they exposed him to that, right?
Yeah.
And so then he just kind of took off, and then your mom and dad eventually get married, and then they both start working for Life in Messiah, and then they actually move to Israel.
Yeah.
Were you born in Israel?
I have never been to Israel.
What?
Which is ridiculous.
That is ridiculous.
So,
you should probably have like 5 trips prepaid from your mom and dad to Israel, right?
Are you listening? Thank you. Yeah, I actually bring that up to them not infrequently. Like, oh, isn't that cute?
Like, gonna go to Israel.
Kat, my sister, who's just above me, was born in Israel, and I've not been. So I just like to blame them. I could go by now. I feel like it's something I need to hold on to. And
Clearly, they've ruined your life.
You've
had a horrible childhood.
I appreciate that.
You weren't able to go to Israel, and that just sucks. But you're the youngest
I am.
of 4
Yep, 4
girls.
The oldest is a boy.
1 boy, 3 girls.
3 girls. Yeah.
Okay. And you were just raised in the Chicagoland area, and as far as you know, just really normal.
I mean, again, what is normal? But sure.
When did you find out kind of the extraordinariness? Because you're just a normal teen, right? Just living life, right?
Yeah, I grew up in Munster.
Right.
Just yes.
2 parents.
Yeah.
Christian school, public school.
Public.
Two parents. They're married. They go to work every day. You don't know. You don't care. Whatever. But when do you find out really how extraordinary your parents are?
I mean, I don't think that was ever hidden because I like to say I grew up in the back of a minivan because although we lived in Chicagoland area, my dad was preaching at churches all over the country all the time.
Okay.
So, I've been to almost all 50 states.
So as a child, you traveled a lot. You were on the road with your dad preaching and teaching.
Yep.
And he just pulled you in after him.
Yeah. Yeah, so we'd get brought up on stage and
shown off, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Right. The Ventrop family, right?
Exactly. It's totally normal.
This side of it, any weirdness with you? Any bitterness? Like, I don't know anything about you or your childhood or your, I don't know if you went through the drug years and the weird years or whatever. I mean, we all,
my whole life is the weird years, but sure.
But being raised by parents like that, who are so extraordinary, so vocal about ministry, sometimes their kids get a little flaky and
usually,
right?
Yeah. Yeah. So I am the most rebellious of us in that, I'm a Democrat. I know. God bless.
Didn't I tell you not to get political here?
That's all I said. I got into nothing else.
Right.
But yeah, I'm the most rebellious. But that was, there was not crazy scenes or whatever.
No time in jail.
Right. No. It was I kissed 2 boys kind of a thing. Right. Maybe more than 2, whatever.
2.5.
Yeah. But yeah, so one of the things that I've kind of worked through of, all of our past makes us who we are.
Yeah.
Right? And growing up as Wes and Lori Tabor's daughter,
it's your identity, right?
That is, most of my friends weren't taking pictures to put on, prayer cards to send to people. And then we'd go to churches and people would come up to us like they knew us because our faces are on their, on their refrigerator. And it was just such a strange, dichotomy of I'm just a kid and yet you think you know me and, whatever. But we would always, every time I can hear it ringing in my ears, we would pull up to some stranger's house that we were staying at for, the night or whatever. And my parents would say okay, be on your best behavior. Remember who you belong to. And, they're just telling their kids, don't be jerks. Don't be screaming. Don't make a mess. We're in someone else's home. We're guests. But hearing that over and over and over and over throughout my childhood, not to blame anyone else.
I hear you.
But, it kind of put a seed in my head of, I need to hide a part of who I am.
All right, so you kind of fell into excuse me, you fell into kind of a performance-based
Yeah.
mentality of life, which is common. I mean, I don't want to say that your parents screwed you, but let's be honest.
Yeah.
Now that I'm a parent, I know that I'm going to screw up my kids.
We all screw
right?
up our kids, yeah.
The best day I have screws up my kids,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So you were kind of forced to believe the performance-based model of living,
Yeah.
right? And so you didn't even really know, but you kind of grew up as a Christian celebrity.
Sure.
Traveling, going to churches,
Yeah.
preaching, teaching. Your parents became a big deal.
Yeah, I mean, we were by no means famous, but to the Christian crowd,
Yeah.
like I would say we were a known entity. And my parents being as wise and amazing as they are, people are very frequently leaning into them for wisdom and for insight and for, so it was, we grew up in church and everyone knew who we were, and just kind of, being a bit of that known entity and being like, okay, how I show up is a reflection on them, so it's my job to
perform,
to show up as expected.
Right. So grade school, high school, you kissed 2 boys.
Something like that.
And when you had the opportunity to leave,
Yeah.
graduation day,
Yeah.
you're out of here.
Yeah, so I've learned to not tell God I'm not going to do something.
Yeah, well, I'm 47. I'm just learning, right?
Yeah. Because every time I say, like, I don't know what I'm going to do, but I'm not going to do
I'm not
that.
going to do that. And so what is the thing that you told God you weren't going to do, clearly that you did?
Yeah, go to Moody.
Moody what?
Moody Bible Institute.
You went to college at Moody Bible Institute
I did.
in Chicago.
I did.
How did you, why did you, what are you thinking?
Dear Lord,
Right?
I don't know. I was like, I don't know what I'm going to do, where I'm going to go, but it's not going to be Moody because, like, both of my grandparents
Yeah.
had taught there.
Yeah.
My dad went there. My brother went
Yeah.
there.
Yeah.
No, I'm not going to Moody.
So, all right, so all through high school, like, what was your identity? Like, if you were part of the Breakfast Club, which one were you?
That's
Do you
a good
know
question.
Breakfast Club?
Of course I know Breakfast Club. I mean, I am young, but I do know Breakfast Club. That's a good question. So youth group was a huge part.
So you love church, the church people, your
Yes.
church people, not your parents' church people necessarily,
Sure,
but you loved your church group.
I did.
Your friends, your
My
high
youth
school
group-
buddies.
Yep. My youth group was like my people.
Okay, cool.
For sure.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely. So that was definitely a big part of who I was. Good. But even in youth group, I was a leader, but I was always like, youth leaders were always like, oh, Christine, stop saying that. Or, calm down. You need to
perform
put
better.
your sass back in your pocket a little bit.
Yeah.
I'm a very sassy girl.
So you were, okay, we'll get on that later. So you were, still told to perform better, be better, do better, talk better,
Yeah.
right? Okay. And so you graduated high school and you really had no dreams or aspirations or I want to be a movie star, I want to be an engineer, I want to be a doctor. You had none of that.
I mean, so one thing that's pretty key about who I am is if you tell me that I can't do something, I'm like, cool, that's what I want to do.
So we're going to figure that one out.
Yeah, so I learned that women don't go into maths and sciences, and I was like, well, that's ridiculous. So I went to Moody for 1 year and was like, dear Lord, I cannot. For the first time in my life, I had a curfew, and instead...
So Moody was more strict than your parents.
Yeah. Well, my parents had to trust me because they traveled so much.
Yeah.
So
in high school, I'm assuming then you actually were home quite a bit by yourself.
Yeah.
When you were old enough to be on your own,
Yep.
they traveled.
Yep.
They were back to Israel 100 times a year, right?
Yeah. Yeah. And being the youngest,
Yeah.
it got to a point where then, Josh goes off to college and then Jen leaves and then Kat leaves and then it's just little
You're home by
me left
yourself.
myself. Yeah, and that was hard. This is a story I haven't told maybe ever.
Let's hear it.
At one point, my parents I don't even know where they were, but I was a senior, maybe I graduated, and I was struggling with depression. I was really feeling...
Isolated.
Yeah.
Purposeless.
Just knocked off. I'd gone through a season of loss with a bunch of different things. And I just felt like everything that I'd been standing on was one by one just taken away from me and crumbling. And I just felt like I don't even know what's left. And my parents were somewhere, and they called to check in, or I texted them or something, and kind of let them in on like I'm not doing great. And so they called and like, what's going on, and kind of shared like that I was really struggling, just having a hard time. And they were like, okay, well, we'll come home. And the fact that they were willing to leave their schedule,
their engagement, right,
and come back home to me, like, tore me apart.
Yeah.
I never, not for one moment of my life, doubted my parents' love for me, but it always felt like I needed to be put on the back seat for God's work. Like, God's work is really important. What they do matters. Yeah. They're changing lives. So I just have to take care of myself.
Oh, man.
Like, I just got to do it myself.
Yeah.
So the fact that they're like, we're coming home, I was like, really? Like, I matter? Not that I doubted I mattered, but it just was.
I hear you.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's the image that you have in yourself, though nobody said it. Yeah. It's just the image that you felt that you had. Being the dutiful daughter, you would always put your dreams and ambitions on the back burner for God's purpose in your parents' life.
Yeah.
And just to hear, whether they came home or not, but just to hear them be willing to put their life on the back burner for you had to wreck you.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So you talked about depression. Is it something you struggled with a lot, or just back then, or just for the day, or what?
Yeah, I've had a couple periods where I struggled a little bit. I wouldn't say it's been, like a very frequent or, common struggle, but I've had periods where I'm like, okay, I get this. I know what this feels like, which honestly I think is from God, because my husband does struggle more, more so with anxiety. But I think that if I hadn't experienced that myself,
right,
my compassion for that would be non-existent.
Right. No, I understand. So, high school, normal. You want to be a mathematician because you were told you can't.
Right.
So you go to Moody. And you,
well, I think it was kind of out of order, but sure.
And you last a year just because it was just way too strict.
Yes. I was like, no, I want to go drink and make out with boys.
That sounds like my color. Right?
Stop telling me I need to be.
So eventually, at the end of your first year at Moody, you said what?
I said, I cannot do this anymore. I don't think I'm getting out of this what I'm supposed to be, because instead of deepening my relationship with God, all I'm doing is figuring out ways to bend the rules.
Bend the rules, perform better publicly.
Yeah. To do enough so that, I mean, I got good grades, I did whatever, but, I was like, this is not the point.
This isn't for you.
Yeah.
So this is a great place to have our cliffhanger.
Dun, dun, dun.
How incredible is this? We're with Christine Gerling, who just told us that she dropped out of Moody because it was too strict.
That's right.
So we come back talking with Christine, part 2. We're going to find out where life took you after Moody.
Yeah.
Hey, guys, thanks for checking out 316 Podcast. I'm Clayton with 316 Creative Works. Hey, this is Clayton from 316 Creative Works, talking about our podcast. Listen, if you like any of this stuff that you saw or you heard, I'm going to give you a couple places where you might find it besides coming in live to the Farmhouse Studios. There's a couple platforms you can find these on. So you can check out Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and SoundCloud. So for the cheap seats in the back there, let me say this one more time. You can go to Facebook, YouTube, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, iTunes, and SoundCloud. You can find it under 316 Podcasts.